I did a hair analysis on a 2-year-old child with level 3 autism that showed 6 really important mineral imbalances. And in this video, I want to show you the connection between each of these imbalances and autism symptoms. And stick around to the end because I'll share another case where addressing similar imbalances led to exciting improvements. Hi, I'm Brian from Mineral Balance, and today we're looking at an interesting case study involving a 2-year-old boy with level 3 autism, which is considered the most severe kind of autism. His mother decided to do a hair tissue mineral analysis after learning about the connection between heavy metal toxicity and autism. What we'll explore today are the 6 key findings from this child's hair analysis and how these imbalances are linked to autism. So let's get started. For those who don't know, hair tissue mineral analysis, or HTMA, is a lab test that measures the mineral and toxic metal content of a hair sample. And one of the big advantages of doing a hair test versus a blood test or a urine test, especially when it comes to minerals, testing for minerals, is that when you take a hair sample that's an inch or an inch and a half long, that's going to give you a 3 to 4 month record of mineral accumulation, whereas a blood or urine test is an instantaneous measurement that can be influenced by various factors that are going on in someone's life. So with the hair test, you're getting a long-term measurement, a long-term assessment of your mineral levels. And there are several other advantages of using a hair test when testing for minerals. So here are his actual test results and the 6 imbalances, major imbalances that I identified on his test. And we'll go into detail about each of these imbalances in this video. So the first major imbalance on this hair test was this high aluminum level. And most people have a high aluminum level when they do a hair test. Aluminum is really all over the place. There's a lot of different sources, but this level of 4.24 is what I would consider between 5 and 10 times higher than acceptable. And this is important because aluminum is a neurotoxin. It's a well-known neurotoxin. It poisons the brain. And children with autism have been shown to have higher levels of aluminum in their brains. And also, it's implicated in other major health conditions like Alzheimer's disease. And essentially, the way it works is that aluminum activates the microglia cells in the brain, which are the brain's immune cells. And that causes a state of chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation leads to damage in developing brain regions, and that can include those that govern language and social interaction, which are commonly impaired in autistic children. When the brain is chronically inflamed, that can also lead to behavioral issues like irritability, erratic behavior, and diminished brain function in general. Now, aluminum becomes even more toxic when it combines with mercury or fluoride and possibly other metals as well. But these are the two that have been studied. And as you can see, I have mercury as one of the imbalances here, even though the level is very low. We'll talk about that a little later in this video. So aluminum toxicity is a big piece of the puzzle when it comes to autism. The next imbalance I want to talk about is a high calcium to magnesium ratio. And as you can see, the ratio here is 11.33, which is almost double of what the ideal ratio should be. And this is essentially a magnesium deficiency. The magnesium level was low on this test by itself, but when calcium is high and magnesium is low, that emphasizes the low magnesium level. So this is essentially a magnesium deficiency. And that's important because magnesium is known as the calming mineral. And it helps to relax the nervous system. So when magnesium is low and calcium is high, that can lead to an excess of calcium influx into the cell, which leads to excessive nerve firing and hyperexcitability. And this phenomena can explain a lot of autism symptoms regarding sensory overwhelm in particular, like the hypersensitivity to light, touch, sounds. And then that, of course, can lead to other autism symptoms like withdrawal, because the child cannot handle the excess stimulation, and even rigidity as a means to control the sensory environment and reduce stress. So the imbalance with this ratio of calcium and magnesium essentially indicates that there's an imbalance in the nervous system's primary calming mineral, which is magnesium, versus the primary excitatory mineral, which is calcium. The next imbalance is an extremely low sodium to potassium ratio. Just like the calcium to magnesium ratio, when we do the hair test, we're really looking at the balance between key minerals. That's a major focus of the test and the interpretation of this test. Now, sodium to potassium ratio, we call that the vitality ratio. And it has to do with adrenal gland function and the electrical potential of the cells. Sodium and potassium are two major electrolytes. So this is a really important imbalance. And the current ratio on the test is 0.26 when the ideal should be about 2.5. So that is extremely low. And what that indicates is basically a chronic stress state and an inability to handle stress. And for autistic individuals, the stress is largely internal stress, the biochemical stress, such as toxic metals and nutrient deficiencies. And the low stress tolerance is displayed in many of the autistic symptoms, such as withdrawal, restrictive and repetitive activities, meltdowns, and the inability to handle changes in routine. And there's much more that can be said about the sodium to potassium balance. For example, it's very critical for signal transmission within the brain. And so without the proper balance of these two, signals within the brain are not transmitted properly, which can cause issues processing information. But this is a big indicator of chronic stress and poor stress tolerance. The autistic children, they have a lot of internal stress, so they cannot handle much external stress. The next imbalance I want to talk about is the low zinc level. And this is really a key imbalance in autism, a consistent finding in children with autism. Zinc is one of the most critical minerals in the body, involved in over 200 enzymes. And a zinc deficiency early on in childhood can be extremely detrimental. And some of the ways that a zinc deficiency can cause or contribute to autistic symptoms are through the glutamate system, where it can disrupt the balance of glutamate, which is the excitatory neurotransmitter, and GABA, which is a relaxing and calming neurotransmitter. Zinc supports the production and function of GABA, and it also helps to put the brakes on the glutamate system. And so without enough zinc, that can lead to an imbalance that causes excessive brain activity and hyperexcitability. And that's just one piece. Zinc is also needed for brain growth and development. It's needed for all DNA synthesis, all synthesis of new tissues. Zinc is absolutely required for that. Another big function of zinc, especially when it comes to autism, is the protection against toxic metals and oxidative stress. Whenever there's oxidative stress in the body, it uses up a lot of zinc and can deplete zinc reserves. And so we talked about some of these other imbalances, like the high aluminum level, that creates a lot of oxidative stress, and it's going to use up a lot of the zinc in the body. And then that zinc is not going to be there to be used for all of its other functions. Now, another really important aspect of zinc is that when zinc is low, the protein metallothionein is also going to be low. And metallothioneins are zinc-containing proteins that are needed for the removal of toxic metals. And when they're low, it's going to allow toxic metals to enter the brain. There's a lot of metallothioneins at the blood-brain barrier, usually. But if you're low in zinc and you don't have enough metallothioneins at the blood-brain barrier, it's going to allow toxic metals into the brain, which is something that we find a lot with autistic children, the aluminum, the mercury, etc. And so the low zinc could really be at the core of a lot of these problems. Zinc is also needed to break down the gluten and casein proteins, which is likely why many children with autism have allergies to these two proteins. This next imbalance is a little counterintuitive. The mercury level on this test is very low. And with healthy children, we expect to see some mercury in their hair, actually, from the food and the environment. And when levels are too low, it can indicate impaired elimination, specifically of mercury. And that's a problem because if mercury isn't leaving the body, then it may be building up in the tissues, including the brain. And there have been several studies examining hair mercury levels in autistic children and have found this paradoxical pattern, the lower levels in the hair despite higher body burdens. So this essentially indicates impaired detoxification, and other markers of impaired detoxification, such as poor methylation and poor glutathione status, are also very common in autism. Now, this poor detoxification ability is going to worsen reactions to environmental toxins like shots, like medications, and really any other exposure to toxins. The body doesn't have the necessary materials to deal with these toxic insults. And so this is an important finding because mercury is very toxic to the brain. And this is telling us that there's likely mercury that's trapped inside the brain. And the final imbalance that I want to point out is the low sodium level. And if we can go back to the test, I can show you. See, the sodium level here is 5 when ideal is about 25. So this is quite a low level. And basically that's a sign of adrenal insufficiency or adrenal exhaustion, that the glands are struggling to produce adequate hormones like aldosterone that control the sodium level in the body. Now, the low sodium in this case makes sense because the chronic stress that autistic individuals experience is eventually going to deplete the adrenal glands and lead to adrenal burnout. And then, of course, this is going to cause an impaired stress response or dysregulation of the stress response, which can have systemic impacts. It can affect your sleep, your cortisol rhythms, your digestion, your immune function. So when we put this all together, we've got the aluminum toxicity, we've got the poor elimination of mercury, which is essentially mercury toxicity, and poor detoxification ability. So there's likely other toxins that are trapped inside the body, the adrenal stress and the adrenal depletion, and then the mineral deficiencies, the zinc and magnesium deficiency. We've got a perfect storm for autism and other neurodevelopment conditions. And there's a common underlying thread in a lot of these imbalances, and that is that they all cause or contribute to a state of excitotoxicity, where brain cells become dangerously overexcited, and also a state of chronic inflammation. So the nervous system is overstimulated and under-resourced. Now I want to show you how addressing some of these imbalances can lead to exciting improvements in autistic symptoms. This is a case of a 2-year-old nonverbal autistic child. And after 2 months using targeted nutritional therapy, the mother reported that the child developed more words and a better attention span. Then, after 6 months, she noted that his eczema improved. He had better eye contact and joint attention, and he would now hug and kiss the mother and show affection in various other ways. After 7 months, she said that he was a much more even-keeled and happier kid, and that he was making tremendous eye contact and interactive behavior. So I'm excited to see what other improvements we can make as the child continues on this path. And, you know, to me, this is not something miraculous, because these improvements are consistent with published studies that show that when biochemical imbalances are addressed, autistic children show improvement in both behavior and other symptoms. Now, every child's response is going to be individual and different, but addressing biochemical imbalances has tremendous potential in autism. And I also want to show you some pretty incredible improvements on his test results. So on the left is his first test, and on the right is his third test about 8 or 9 months later. And as you can see here, this test was absolutely terrible. His calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium levels were all extremely low. His manganese level was absurdly low. Zinc, extremely low. So really some critical imbalances. And when you look at the test on the right, you can see his calcium went from 9 to 24. His magnesium went from 1 to 3. Sodium from 6 to 46, and potassium from 4 to 76, which shows a very good response of his adrenal glands. And then his manganese went from literally almost nothing in his hair to a pretty decent amount. His zinc level actually got lower despite giving him a lot of zinc, but that is actually explainable and kind of part of the process. Now, I wanted to do this video because I wanted to show you that there are biochemical imbalances in autism, consistent biochemical imbalances in autism, although not all autistic children have the exact same imbalances. And it's important to know that hair analysis is not diagnostic for autism. It's just showing underlying imbalances that contribute can contribute to a number of different problems, but there are consistent imbalances. I've done hair tests on a number of autistic children and even autistic adults, and there are some major themes within the test results. But these imbalances are measurable, and they're also addressable. There's plenty of research and studies that show that children with autism improve on magnesium, zinc, vitamin B6, etc. And with hair analysis and the system that I use, we can sort of address all of these imbalances together and address them in a holistic manner by balancing the child's system rather than just trying to throw everything at the child like many parents do when they first start researching therapies to help with autism. So it's also important to know that early intervention is critical with autism. You will get much better results when you address these imbalances early in life while the brain and the body are still developing. And also addressing the underlying biochemistry and the nutritional problems gives parents another option besides just conventional behavioral management. So with nutritional therapy, there's a lot of hope when it comes to improvements in sleep, behavior, sensory processing, learning capacity, and much more. So we can support every child's potential by understanding their unique body chemistry and addressing their unique biochemical needs. If you want to learn more, you can contact me through my website. I would love to work with more autistic children. I'm kind of heading in that direction for that to be the focus of my practice. So if you'd like to work together or learn more, please contact me through my website.